Today's podcast is sponsored by PM Powered. I am Wanda Curlee, your authority on all things project, program, and portfolio management. I have some wonderful news. On April 19th, PM Powered will offer a live webinar titled The Baby Steps of Portfolio Management. Go to PM Powered and sign up for this 30-minute live webinar. In this webinar, you'll learn why project portfolio management is the newest area of project management. Learn why project management is now in the strategy area, and learn the basics of speaking to executive leadership and developing a business case that will entice executive leadership to introduce project portfolio management into their business. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. The first article I have, and it's from Singularity Hub, is a 3D printed electric car will enter production this year. Why did I bring this up? Well, one thing is I'm very interested in 3D printing, and that's a new area for project managers. So this was just exciting news to me. But I'm thinking, what would they do a printed car, a 3D printed car for? But before I go on, what is printed on this car? So everything is 3D printed except the chassis, the seats, and glass. Can you imagine that? Everything else is printed. Now, the car itself can only go 43 miles per hour, and it goes for about 96 miles before it has to be charged again. So what industry would this really help for? Well, believe it or not, think about your postal carrier. They don't go fast. They don't go hundreds of miles. They probably do less than 100 miles in any run that they're doing. And so the first industry to buy this electric car is the Italian Postal Service. And so there are other areas to go into as well. So you're thinking, well, how much does this cost? Well, a printed car costs about $10,000, and it takes about 3 days to make. So you're thinking 3 days, but if robotics can do a regular type of car quicker, then does it really make sense? Well, even with robotics, a regular car takes 30 to 35 hours to make. So you're saying this 3D car is probably just as competitive, if not more so, for certain industries. I don't think I would buy this car to go out on the highway systems or the Autobahn, for example, because it just doesn't go fast enough. But remember, this is the first generation, and project managers, you can take the creativity that's needed to make these cars go even faster, be printed faster and cheaper. So stay tuned for what 3D printing will do, not only in the car industry, but remember we talked last week about the house industry. So let's continue. The next one is the planned solar farm in Saudi Arabia would be 100 times bigger than any in the world. Today, the biggest solar farm is in China, and it introduces about 2.7 gigawatts of capacity, which is amazing to me. But the solar farm that they're doing in Saudi Arabia is expected to do 200 gigawatts of power. That's more solar power than what was done 100 times more than what was done in the year 2000. Excuse me. Now it is in the planning phases, so that means that project managers are going to be needed to build the planning and to determine if it's even feasible. Right now, the funding has been put in place, but again, planning has to be done. And why is it being done in Saudi Arabia? Well, think about it. You've got that huge desert area, and you also have the reflection from the sand, which also will gather solar. So you have the solar coming down onto the desert. You have it reflecting back up from the sand. So here you have all kinds of solar power that's just going nowhere. So it's something that can be done by project managers. So, and you have the vast amount of space that is needed. So I see solar power coming into all areas of the Middle East because these countries that are forward-thinking, such as Saudi Arabia, understand that their oil reserves will not be there forever. So why not create solar powered farms where they can sell off energy as they create it? Um, so it's very forward looking and very astute of these uh, countries to do this. So I think it's an exciting time. We in the United States probably need to think about more solar farms. We could do it out in the Midwest where there's huge, huge areas. We could do it in the Mojave Desert where there are huge areas of reflective power as well. Okay, let's switch over a little bit into the healthcare. We talked about healthcare last week and what IoT and AI can do. But now there's a new bionic arm that blurs lines between self and machine for wearers. So this article goes into how if you blindfold somebody who has a prosthetic, they can't tell you where that prosthetic is at any one time as far as distance and what that prosthetic is doing. They've been able to use brain power to move prosthetics, but still again, the person who is blindfolded can't tell you what that prosthetic arm is doing at anything. Well, there has been some very exciting news. They are now taking vibrations of the tendons and different muscles and putting it into and somehow manipulating it so it goes into the prosthetic arm and feeds back into the brain. So now a person who's wearing a prosthetic arm, and it's just in the testing phases, they have blindfolded them and put earmuffs on them so they can't hear or see anything. And through the vibrations, by manipulating the vibrations in the chest and the other arm and feeding it into the brain and to this prosthetic arm, the wearer of the prosthetic can tell you where exactly the prosthetic limb is in anywhere in space. They can tell you what the prosthetic hand and arm is doing. So for example, is it grabbing like it would for a barbell? So does it have a cylindrical grabbing motion, or is it a tight fist? Is it going out and in space and trying to grab something? So all of this is done via vibrations. Can you imagine the feedback and the information that these people that are wearing prosthetics will be? They can now see and understand what their arm is doing without having to have the visual cues. This is exciting news, and can you imagine how these people feel? Well, they'll be able to sense a prosthetic like they sense their real arm. To me, that's just amazing. So before we know it, we'll have prosthetics for your legs too, and people will be able to walk because they'll walk more and feel the prosthetic while they're walking so they can understand if they've stepped on something without falling first or losing their balance based on the prosthetic. I don't wear prosthetics, so I really don't understand all the mechanisms and how people feel when they're wearing a prosthetic. But reading this article, it's just amazing to me what they are now doing based on understanding how the body works. Who would have thought that vibrations of your tendons and of your muscles would feed into a prosthetic? This had to do with creativity. And remember, you as a project manager can bring creativity into any industry. You just have to think outside of the box. That's what these researchers did. Okay, let's go now to the next one, which is an innovator city guide to Tallinn, Estonia. This week I was watching Fox News, and there was a little tidbit on Trump, and he was celebrating the centennial for the Baltic countries. One of the Baltic countries is Estonia, and unbeknownst to me until I heard the president of Estonia talking, is Estonia has been labeled as the e-Estonia because they are the place for emerging technologies, which I find fascinating. So Tallinn is the capital of Estonia. And as I mentioned before, it's e-Estonia because they do everything there. And I did not know that Skype was started in Estonia. So yes, they have a lot of things. And so how are they doing that? They have actually a showroom, and it's called Lift 99. It's where they bring entrepreneurs together, give them some space to work, and the entrepreneurs can actually talk to each other. They are given the technology that they needed to work and create their ideas. So what else do they do? There's a very tight coupling with the university. It's called the Business and Innovation Center of Tallinn University of Technology. And this university also provides space for entrepreneurs to come in and talk to scholars, talk to other entrepreneurs, talk to students, and understand how they can bring the necessary things to resolve problems. So the scholars bring in problems that there is in the industry, in different industries, and these entrepreneurs actually try to develop something to answer the area that is needed. So again, the co-working space is called Lift 99, is the central hub of Estonia's startup ecosystem with a vibrant community of entrepreneurs who value growing together and giving back. What's the second thing that they call it? It's called the marketplace, or the Mektori. It's the Business and Innovation Center of Tallinn University of Technology. And as I mentioned before, it brings scientists, students, and entrepreneurs together to work on real-world challenges in product development and technology transfer. There's local meetups and networks. So there's one called Founders to Founders, is by invitation only to meet up with other entrepreneurs. Their event series brings in invited speakers, facilitates groups discussion, and allows time for networking and socializing. There's actually free Wi-Fi at a best coffee shop in Tallinn. It's called Gourmet Coffee. They use locally sourced ingredients, so you can drink coffee and have free Wi-Fi, and it's a high-speed Wi-Fi. There's the Startup the Startup Neighborhood, which I found very interesting. It's called, and I'll probably not pronounce this correctly, Telliskivi Creative City is a collection of factory buildings that has been transformed into a popular hangout and office space with offbeat restaurants, art expos, flea markets, alternative theater, and clubbing. The reclaimed space is also home to Estonia's startup heavyweights, Garage 48 and Lift 99, Funderbeam, Elevate, and over 200 other businesses, companies, and NGOs. So yes, we have things like that in the United States as well, but I don't think we have integrated it as well, especially to bring in startup companies. There's ESTBAN, Estonian Business Angel Networks. It's a well-known investors and venture capitalists for business angels in Estonia and its neighboring countries. The network reviews applications from entrepreneurs seeking investment and offers opportunities to potential investors to fund startups. The best way to get around is Taxify. It's actually a Estonian-born rival to Uber, and it's the most convenient way to get around in Tallinn. Then they also talk about the Kotzebue Bakery. They have sourdough bread. So these are one of the things that entices people to come to Estonia, is this bakery. They have a cocktail bar, which is reminiscent of the 1920 speakeasy. It's called Whisper Sister. And tourists must do, it's the Tallinn Seaplane Harbor. So just think about, the reason I bring this all up is because this took project management to put a vision for what they wanted Tallinn to look like. And actually the whole country of Estonia. It took effort and project management to make Estonia the e-capital of the world. So project managers, you can do this. You have the creativity to do it. You have the neural intellect to do this, because you bring people together to bring out their creative juices. You can make rock stars. You can make rainmakers. You can make coaches and playmakers. And if you want to find out more about the rock stars, the coach playmakers, and the rainmakers, please go to PM Powered and sign up for some of my consulting. So let's jump into the next area. This is the future IoT connectivity. Plug in your business, not your technology. For years and years and years, especially when technology was booming, as it still is today, when it first started to boom, people just bought technology to buy technology. And they found out that that's really not the thing to do, because technology is not a silver bullet. You have to bring in what makes sense for your company. If your company is not forward edge and isn't the forward thinkers of the industry, then don't bring in the latest technology. Wait until it's proven. There are other companies out there that want to be the that want to be on that rolling wave. They want to be on the first wave that comes in of technology. So they have a lot of good things that happen, but they also have a lot of failures. So understand what's going on in the industry, especially for the technology, and maybe you want it to be proven, or maybe not on that forward wave before you bring it into yours. So look at what makes sense for your organization. So this fellow that was writing this Future of IoT Connectivity, he said, I recently returned from Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and he was talking about how all the different IoTs that were there and connectivity between IoTs was an exciting news. But he said one of the things that you have to determine for your company when you're thinking about IoT and technology is think about these factors: frequency, max range, max data throughput, latency, power consumption, encryption and security, scalability via network topology, cost of manufacture, and sustainment. Now, when you think about these things, if you do one, it's going to probably affect the others. So you've got to understand all of that and make sure that you put this into your business case for the technology that you want to use, and understand that if you're looking at frequency, how does it affect the max range? If you're looking at latency, how does it affect power consumption or encryption and security? All of these are interrelated, and you as the project manager have to be able to articulate this in a business case and in your planning so that you can tell senior leadership, yes, we should adopt this, or no, we shouldn't. Some of the other things that were discussed is that when you're talking about power consumption, there's different ways that you can do it. You can go back to a wired solution. Wired solutions are still good. I know we're all about doing non-wired solutions such as wireless, but wired solutions might be effective for your organization in the type of technology that you're bringing to overcome something. So don't discount wired technology. You might want to bring in short-range wireless. So short-range IoT connectivity technologies are used to transfer data over short physical distances. So understand that you might have to have a coupling of wired and short range. Remember that short-ranged wireless solution is low power consumption and small size, but the trade-off of shorter range and often smaller bandwidth. So long-range wireless comes in two flavors. It's cellular and non-cellular. Both of these offer great range and bandwidth, but they're shorter range options, but often at higher power consumptions and costs. So understand all of this. You can take into account that you might need to do a hybrid of wired solutions, short-range wireless, and long-range wireless. All of these you need to think about for your business and think about how you're going to fund it as well. All of these come with a cost. So remember, when I talked about those items before, frequency, max range, max data throughput, latency, power consumption, encryption, and security, scalability, and cost. Cost is always a factor, so you have to understand how you're going to integrate all of those. It was a great article. I recommend that you go out and look at it. So kind of staying on that same thing is emerging technologies remain a gamble in 2018. Again, the author of this article was saying basically the same thing, that CIOs have all this technology that are hitting them in the face, and they understand the technology, but sometimes they want to have the latest and greatest in their organization, but maybe that's not what is needed by the business itself. The CIO understands technology. The CIO understands what might be great for emerging technologies for the company. But what's the CIO and what is brought out in this article is that the CIO needs to be the bridge to business. So the CIO needs to be able to articulate these new technologies and understand the risks that's afforded by these two new technologies, and speak with the business leaders on the business side to understand which gambles should be taken and which ones should not be. And the project manager can play a big role. When we talked about the future of IoT, so if you're bringing IoT, you need to look at all of those different things that we talked about before. Remember, those were frequency, max range, max data throughput, latency, power consumption, encryption and security, scalability, and cost. So the CIO, when he's being the bridge, he needs to bring in project managers to help him or her articulate the efforts that are needed to bring in new technologies, emerging technologies. Or maybe that the business doesn't need emerging technologies. Maybe it needs to wait until it's a proven technology. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Value in IoT interoperability discussed at IoT Build USA 2018. So this is another conference that was there on that was discussed on IoT, and this is about the interoperability, and it was in San Francisco. And it said, before the advent of IoT, leading companies could create value with a proprietary technology stack that locked in customers. But today, this can't be done. IoT has to do like every other industry has done. Go back to when we had DVDs, or even before then, when you had a VCR and you plugged in the tape. Well, there was Betamax, and there was, and the name has escaped me, but there was the Betamax and the other version. Well, Betamax ended up going nowhere, and we ended up using the VCR that was more of a rectangular tape. Excuse me, I can't remember the name of that technology. Think about HD TVs. There were several different technologies, and one finally won out. Sometimes it takes government to step in and dictate what the technology is. But more often than not, it's better that industry itself dictate the technology. And this is what this conference was all about. So there is an open fog consortium that they're talking about developing a reference architecture to support IoT interoperability, interchangeability, and composability for different use cases across different levels. So level 1 is the device or technology interoperability layer. Level 2 is the syntactic level of interoperability corresponding to protocols like XML and JSON. Level 3 is semantic layer for enabling AI and deep learning to make sense of it. And level 4 is the ambient loop layer for enabling feedback loops between people and machines. I don't pretend to be an expert in any one of these levels. I understand at a very high level, probably the 200,000 foot level, what each level means. But it's going to be you in the industry, the project managers in the industry, that can dictate how this is brought together. You'd have to work with other people in the IoT field to understand what device and technology interoperability layer is needed for the devices that your organization is creating. Think about Google, think about Alexa, think about Siri. They're not interoperable with each other, but in the future, I would guess that either one of those three will take over the industry, and they will be the de facto requirements and de facto requirements that have to be done to do the interoperability. But think of all the other devices that work with these Alexa, Siri, and Google. You can buy things to do your heat. Think about Nest. Is it interoperable with all of those three, or is it only interoperable with one? Are there devices that only work with Google but don't work with the others? It's getting so complex nowadays that we actually have to bring in professionals to wire up your house, to have people talk, to have all these machines and IoT talk to each other. Now, if you are savvy, you can do it on your own, but it does take some time. My son actually has some of these interoperabilities in his house, and I've seen him be very frustrated trying to get the different things talking to each other. So while you might be a professional and it's very easy for you, for those of you that want to do it yourself, it can be done, but it takes a little while to understand and read through the manuals and get it all to work. So while we stay on that, let's talk about smart homes. And I've already talked about this a little bit. So smart homes, IoT, and the customer experience. Remember, I talked about my son, and he was saying that he really wants to connect up his house with he uses Google, but it can be done with Siri, it can be done with Alexa. And he has bought all kinds of little gadgets. I call them gadgets. They're IoT things that plug into the wall. So he's got his television, he's got his heat, he's got his lamps in the different areas, and they're all connected to Google. And Google kind of runs, so you can just say something, and I'm not going to do that or else Google will answer me. But it's very interesting. But I saw some of when he was trying to hook up, how frustrated he was getting. And so there's a whole new industry now that's coming out of professionals that will hook up your house and bring in and do it all in one shot. And then that just allows you to do onesie-twosies as you need it. So think about that from a project management perspective. It takes project management to wire up a house. So, and I say wire up, I mean interconnect a house with IoT. So we're slowly getting in there, and we need to understand how all of this works. So you as a creative project manager can think of different ways to do project management in these different areas. And maybe you can create your own business of developing IoT in different people's houses and understanding what is needed, because it is a project and you need to do it in a manner that makes sense, because you can't just do it willy-nilly or else you'll have them stepping on each other. So with that, today's podcast was sponsored by PM Powered. Remember to go to PM Current and subscribe to the YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts. Our podcast is posted every Monday, and I'd love to see you watching all of my podcasts. I would love to hear from you. If you don't agree with something that I've said, please contact me at wanda@pmpowered.com, and I'll bring you onto the podcast and we can have a discussion. If there's something I'm not covering that you would like to cover, please again contact me, and I'll get it out onto the podcast, one of the future podcasts. If there's some event that you would like me to cover, please let me know, and I will announce it on the podcast so people will attend your event. If you disagree with me, please come on. If you're a project manager in one of these areas, I would love to have you on a podcast and let's discuss. Again, contact me on Wanda@pmpowered.com.